Hello, how are you?
Hi.
I'm very happy you're here.
I'm really excited to be here.
I'm also very happy.
Who would have imagined that Sharon Stone, the goddess of 90 Seconds Hollywood, the face that launched 1,000 fantasies, would one day simply vanish? Not in scandal, not in disgrace, but in silence. One moment, she was the center of every camera flash, the subject of every desire. The next, she was walking alone on quiet cobblestone streets, with no paparazzi in sight and no makeup on her face. How could a woman who once controlled the screen with nothing but a glance willingly step out of the light she fought so hard to reach? What happened behind the curtain of elegance and allure? Why did Sharon Stone, at the height of fame and power, choose to disappear from the world that made her a legend? In this story, Sharon Stone will no longer be the icy seductress of Basic Instinct, nor the red carpet goddess we thought we knew. She will appear in a light few have ever dared to see, raw, wounded, and beautifully human. Before Sharon Stone became the epitome of glamour, she was just a quiet girl in Meadville, Pennsylvania, a forgotten corner of America, where winters were long and dreams were even longer. Born on the 10th of March 1958, she was the second of 4 children in a working-class family. Her father, Joe, worked in a factory. Her mother, Dorothy, was a homemaker and former accountant. The Stones had barely enough to get by, and the emotional atmosphere at home was just as cold as the snowbanks outside their tiny house. From an early age, Sharon knew 2 things: that she was different, and that different wasn't welcome. She was fiercely intelligent, with an IQ of 154, a prodigy who read before kindergarten and entered 2nd grade, when others were still struggling to tie their shoes. But brilliance came at a price. She was ridiculed, bullied, ostracized. "I never fit in," she once said. "Not at home, not at school, not even in my own mind." The child who would one day be adored for her beauty was, back then, invisible. She wore hand-me-down clothes and kept her head down in the hallways, hoping to avoid the next cruel joke whispered behind her back. Teachers praised her mind but ignored her bruises, the internal kind that come from growing up unseen. In one haunting interview, Stone admitted, "I was molested by my grandfather. It went on for years. And the adults around me, they knew." There it was, the hidden rot beneath a picture-perfect small-town childhood. The trauma didn't end there. The moment she learned that her grandmother and mother had been abused by the same man, something shattered inside her, the illusion that pain ends with one generation. Yet, no one talked about it. The silence was louder than any scream. At the age of 14, Sharon suffered a near-fatal accident. While riding a horse, she fell and struck her neck against a clothesline, nearly decapitating herself. She survived barely, but was left with a jagged scar across her throat, a permanent reminder that life could be taken at any moment, without warning. "I grew up knowing I was disposable," she once reflected. "That if I died, nobody would cry for long." She escaped into books, into characters, into imagination. When other kids played outside, Sharon studied anatomy or buried herself in novels. Reality was too raw, too unsafe. Dreams were her only refuge. But the scars followed her. Even as a teenager, her beauty began to bloom, and with it came danger. Older men stared. Whispers followed her home. The line between admiration and threat was thin, and she learned early how to weaponize her intellect as a shield. One of the most haunting images from her youth came not from any tabloid or red carpet, but from a moment she described in her own words. "I used to sit alone in the bathtub, turn off the lights, and pretend I was somewhere else, someone else." That girl, soaked in silence and shadows, would one day become a global icon, but she would never truly forget those nights. Because even when Hollywood crowned her queen, she still carried the ghost of the girl who was never safe, never heard, never truly held. And maybe, That's what made her so dangerous on screen. Not her beauty. Not her intelligence. But the quiet rage of someone who had survived the kind of childhood no one talks about. Sharon Stone didn't run away to Hollywood with stars in her eyes. She left Pennsylvania with a quiet fire, the kind that doesn't explode, but burns beneath the skin for years. At 17, she enrolled in Edinburgh University on a creative writing scholarship, but by 19, she dropped out and flew to New Jersey to pursue modeling. It wasn't a glamorous decision, it was survival. A way out, a way up. And yet, even in modeling, she was too smart, too intense, too sharp. Agencies didn't know what to do with a woman who could quote Dostoevsky while posing for a swimsuit shoot. In 1980, Sharon moved to Europe, hoping for a fresh start. She walked the runways of Paris and Milan, but her soul remained restless. Fashion wasn't the dream. Acting was. So she packed her bags again, this time heading to New York City, and then Los Angeles. She auditioned, and failed. She auditioned again, and failed again. Too icy, too cold, too beautiful to be real. They called her a statue. They called her a Barbie. They never asked what it took to build that armor. In her early years in Hollywood, Sharon lived in a tiny apartment infested with cockroaches, eating canned beans and borrowing clothes. Her beauty opened doors, but none of them led anywhere worth staying. She got bit parts, a few forgettable films, some commercials, nothing that screamed stardom. Then came Total Recall, 1990. A breakout role, yes, but not a breakthrough. She played the seductive wife of Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, a weaponized beauty, a distraction. Hollywood now knew her name, but they didn't see her soul. It wasn't until Basic Instinct, 1992, that everything changed. But the story of how she got that role is filled with betrayal, manipulation, and pain. She fought for the part. Hard. Director Paul Verhoeven didn't believe she could pull it off. Too elegant, he thought. Too polished. So she auditioned and scared everyone in the room. That infamous interrogation scene? The one with the crossed legs and the cold stare that became an icon? It wasn't in the script. And Sharon didn't know the camera would catch that angle. They told me the underwear would not be visible, she later said. But when I saw the final cut, I slapped the director in the face and walked out. She was used. Violated. But the world called it empowerment. Basic Instinct launched her into the stratosphere. But it also put a target on her back. Suddenly, she was the sex symbol of the decade. The thinking man's fantasy. Every man wanted her, every woman feared her, every studio demanded her. And yet, no one really believed in her. She was never the first choice for awards. She was passed over for more serious actresses. She was boxed, labeled, misunderstood. She once said, "They gave me the roles because of how I looked, not because of how I felt." She had won the game. But she hated the rules. In interviews, Sharon always spoke with fire, not desperation, but defiance. She knew what she could do. But she also knew Hollywood would never fully let her do it. Behind the red carpets and diamonds was a woman who had clawed her way out of trauma, only to be re-traumatized in high heels and designer gowns. It was never just about fame. It was about being seen, and finally, being heard. And even when the world screamed her name, Sharon Stone was still that girl in the dark bathtub trying to convince herself she belonged. In 1992, Sharon Stone didn't just arrive, she exploded. Basic Instinct wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural detonation. She became the most talked about actress in the world, the face on every magazine cover, the obsession of a generation. Hollywood called her the new Monroe, but sharper, more dangerous, untouchable. Overnight, Sharon Stone wasn't just famous, she was mythologized. Men feared her, women watched her, and directors lined up to exploit her image. But Sharon? She wanted more than to be watched. She wanted to be understood. After Basic Instinct, she was offered every femme fatale role imaginable. But she didn't want to be a cliché in stilettos. She sought out layered, damaged, brilliant women characters who bled, who broke. In 1995, she stunned everyone with Casino, directed by Martin Scorsese. As Ginger, she was electric, raw, tragic, brilliant. She earned a Golden Globe and an Academy Award nomination, and finally, the world had to admit what she knew all along. She wasn't just sexy, she was extraordinary. But even then, Sharon felt the strings pulling her in directions she didn't choose. The price of being the most desired woman on earth was everything else. She was working non-stop, film after film, press tour after press tour. Her name was gold, her face was money, but behind the scenes, her life was falling apart. She suffered from insomnia, panic attacks, and chronic exhaustion. Her relationships grew distant, her joy disappeared. She said yes to projects she didn't love, to people she didn't trust. "Everyone wanted a piece of me," she once confessed. "But I didn't know how to say no. I thought if I stopped, it would all vanish." She was adored by millions, but often felt utterly alone. She tried to keep control. She founded her own production company. She chose projects that challenged her, but Hollywood rarely gave her the credit. Critics were brutal. Tabloids dissected her love life, her clothes, her aging. When she spoke out about power imbalances, she was called difficult. When she demanded to be treated seriously, she was labeled crazy. When she turned down roles, they said she was washed up. The girl who had survived abuse, poverty, and rejection now had to survive success. And success, in Hollywood, is a double-edged sword, especially for a woman who refuses to smile on cue. Still, she kept rising. Between 1993 and 2000, Sharon starred in over a dozen films, hosted awards shows, became a UNICEF ambassador, and was named the most intelligent woman in Hollywood by several publications. She had the world. She had the crown. But the spotlight, so bright on the outside, was burning her skin. There's a famous photo of her from the Cannes Film Festival, hair swept back, diamonds dripping, flashing that iconic smirk to the cameras. No one saw that moments before, she had been vomiting backstage from anxiety. No one asked why her eyes seemed tired, or why she kept touching her chest like something was wrong. They didn't want the truth. They wanted the illusion. And Sharon Stone gave it to them flawlessly. Because that's what she was trained to do. Behind every headline, every photo shoot, every whispered goddess was a woman losing herself piece by piece. She had reached the summit. But the air was thin, and the climb had cost more than she could admit. "I had everything I ever wanted," she said once, "and I felt nothing." That's the paradox of Sharon Stone's stardom. She broke every rule. She rewrote the script. But the more power she gained, the more she realized how powerless she still was. She had beauty, fame, money, respect. She had everything. Except peace. One moment, I was laughing. The next, I was dying. That's how Sharon Stone described it. It was September 2001. She had just finished a charity event in San Francisco. Her head throbbed, her vision blurred, her balance slipped. At first, she thought it was exhaustion, stress, maybe even dehydration. But it wasn't. A blood vessel had ruptured in her brain. A massive stroke, followed by 9 days of cerebral hemorrhaging. Her brain was bleeding, silently, invisibly, and relentlessly. I felt like I had been shot in the head. she later said. I lost everything, my health, my career, my family. She collapsed in her home and was rushed to the hospital. Doctors didn't think she'd make it through the night. For days, she drifted in and out of consciousness. She forgot her name, forgot how to read, how to speak. At 43, Sharon Stone, the woman who once commanded every room, couldn't even control her own limbs. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was what came after. Hollywood didn't wait for her to recover. Producers stopped calling. Studios removed her from projects. She was branded as unreliable, damaged, too risky. I was forgotten, she admitted. People I had helped for years, they vanished overnight. Friends ghosted her. Money dried up. Even her marriage collapsed. Phil Bronstein, the man she had married in 1998, filed for divorce the following year. They had adopted a son together, Roan, but Sharon lost full custody. They told the court I was unfit, she said. Because I had a brain injury, because I was healing. The woman who had survived so many battles was now fighting the biggest one alone. Recovery took 7 years, not 7 days, not 7 months. 7 long, humiliating, soul-crushing years. She had to relearn everything. Speech therapy, motor coordination, memory recall. And the world watched in silence. Not with concern, but with indifference. There were no headlines saying, "Pray for Sharon." No outpouring of support. No comeback narrative. Because in Hollywood, once your light dims, they don't relight it. They replace it. She tried to work. She accepted small roles, indie projects, anything to feel human again. But behind the scenes, casting agents whispered, "She's not the same. She's too old. She's broken." She was. But not in the way they meant. She wasn't broken because of age. She was broken because of betrayal by a system she had once carried on her shoulders. "I was a joke," she said. "People thought I had lost my mind. I hadn't. I had lost my life." There's one moment that defines this chapter. Sharon was in a restaurant, alone. A group of executives she once worked with sat nearby. They didn't greet her. They didn't even look her way. So she paid for their dinner. Silently. That's the kind of woman Sharon Stone Island. Graceful, even when bleeding. Dignified, even when erased. But that night, when she got home, she cried. Not for their cruelty, but because she realized she didn't need them anymore. Her fall from grace wasn't loud. It was quiet, humiliating, and devastating. But somewhere in that abyss, she found something Hollywood never gave her. Herself. They thought she would vanish quietly. But Sharon Stone was never meant to disappear. She was meant to transform. The years following her stroke were a kind of silent resurrection. No red carpets, no champagne toasts. Just therapy rooms, quiet walks, and thousands of moments where she had to choose. Give up or rebuild. And she rebuilt. Not into what she was, but into something no one expected. Sharon began with the most basic act of defiance. She slowed down. For the first time, she listened to her body, to her soul. She learned to say no to roles, to relationships, to people who drained her. She became spiritual deeply. Not in the Hollywood crystals and yoga way, but in a way forged through pain. She meditated, read philosophy, prayed. "I died," she once said. "And when I came back, I wasn't afraid of anything anymore." She devoted herself to her children. After losing custody of Roan, she went on to adopt 2 more sons, Laird and Quinn. Motherhood, she said, wasn't a role. It was a rebirth. Being a mom saved me. Not the industry, not the applause, my sons. Her home, once a showroom of luxury, became a sanctuary of healing. She filled it with laughter, art, and silence, the kind that heals rather than haunts. She turned her attention outward. As her career slowed, her activism intensified. She became a global ambassador for peace. She raised millions for AIDS research, for women's rights, for brain injury awareness. She traveled to Africa, met with world leaders, stood before Congress not as a star, but as a survivor. In 2013, she received the Nobel Peace Summit Award for her humanitarian work. A decade earlier, Hollywood had written her off. Now, the world applauded her, not for who she played, but for who she had become. She wrote a memoir, The Beauty of Living Twice. In it, she revealed truths no one had dared to ask about. Her abuse, her stroke, her humiliation, her rage, her forgiveness. They tried to erase me, she wrote, but I learned to write myself back in. She no longer chases relevance. She chooses depth. She no longer begs to be seen. She sees herself clearly. There's a quiet strength in the way Sharon Stone walks today. It's not the stride of a sex symbol. It's the walk of a woman who has lived every kind of death and is still very much alive. She paints now, she writes. She spends time with her sons, watches them grow, teaches them kindness and self-worth. I'm not who I used to be, she says. Thank God. Fame once defined her. Now, faith does. Power once corrupted her world. Now, purpose guides it. The Sharon Stone of today does not need validation. She needs only peace, and she finally has it. She once stood before cameras with nothing underneath but a dress. Now, she stands before the world with nothing to hide. And somehow, in a quiet, sacred way, she's never been more beautiful. There's a photo of Sharon Stone, not the iconic leg cross, not the Cannes red carpet, but a candid one, taken years after her stroke. She's wearing no makeup, her hair is loose, she's laughing with her son in the garden. There's no spotlight, no script, no performance, and yet, that's the most powerful image of her life. Because behind every red carpet fantasy, behind every seductive role, there was always a woman searching for peace. And somehow, in the silence of obscurity, she found it. We thought we lost Sharon Stone when she disappeared from Hollywood. But maybe, just maybe, she wasn't lost. Maybe she was finally free. Free from the weight of being a symbol. Free from the prison of perfection. Free to live, to heal, to love, without needing to be adored. She once lit up the world with her beauty. Today, she moves through it with quiet grace. And as we look back on her story, from trauma to triumph, from vanishing to victory, one question lingers. Was her greatest role not on screen, but in life itself? Because what if survival is the most heroic character arc of all? What if the most dazzling stars are the ones that shine in the dark, unseen yet still burning? If this journey moved you, even just for a moment, leave a word of gratitude, not just for Sharon Stone, but for every soul who walked through fire and came back glowing,